In this video, we're going to take a look at the new Anbernic RG552 device and talk about whether or not this is something you should pick up. This is Steve from Restalgia, and let's get started. What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, go down below the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. As I mentioned today, we're going to be taking a look at the new RG552 device from Anbernic. As you guys can see, this is a pretty big box. Now, to put this into comparison to their previous RG351 devices, you can see this is a massively larger device and a massively larger box. That being said, we're going to take everything out of the box. I'm going to show you guys exactly what it comes with, and then we're going to talk about its performance and whether or not it justifies the current price tag. So let's go ahead and get this thing out of the box. So the first thing that we have here is the actual device itself, but we'll set that aside just for a moment. This is a 3 amp USB Type-C power adapter, so it is nice that they do include these, and they did actually send over to me a kit, or I guess case, to keep it protected, and inside the case they did provide me some other universal adapters. So they gave me another one of these USB Type-C power adapters, but then they also gave me an international kit. So I'm imagining that you have the ability to get whatever you need in terms of your plugs. They'll be able to provide it depending on the location in which you are living. Next, we have our USB-C to USB-C type charging cable. We've got two different micro SD cards in here. We've got a smaller 16 gig, which is going to house the Linux operating system. And the second one is a 64 gig micro SD card. You may or may not get this specifically depending on the package you buy. You may get a bigger storage option, you may get a lower storage option, just depends on the package that you pick up. Next, we have a tempered glass screen protector, which is always nice and handy. And then finally, we have the quick system setup and user manual. This actually does come in pretty handy. The system is a dual boot system, so you can run both in Android or in Linux. And depending on what you've got set up, it kind of tells you what the quick keys are and how to operate the main interface. Now, this is the device itself. It is a very big handheld. I'd actually say that it is very similar in size to a Nintendo Switch Lite. So this is going to be substantially larger than their previous version. So if I stack them right on top of one another, you can see that it is quite literally a good 40 to 50% larger. This is a much bigger handheld. Just to give you a size comparison between the RG351M and the RG552. Now, another big difference between this and the RG351M is that the actual housing is not made out of metal. It is actually a plastic, and then it is painted with kind of like a metallic finish. And to be honest, it actually looks pretty good. I would have thought, without touching it and feeling it, that it was indeed metal just from the appearance. But overall, I mean, it doesn't take away from the device in any way, shape, or form. I feel like it looks good and it feels good in your hands. It's not overly heavy. Overall, they did a great job with the design here. In terms of the buttons, you've got your standard D-pad. Now, this D-pad is actually really nice and tight in there. It doesn't have a lot of play, which is really, really good. And in terms of the D-pad movement itself, it does actually feel a little bit softer than the RG351 series, but I actually do like it. It feels really natural and it does feel quite premium. Then we've got our standard ABXY buttons, our start, select, our two analog sticks, and then on the top we have our traditional R1, R2, L1, L2 buttons that are side by side. That being said, with this sort of design, I'm not a huge fan of the way that these buttons are placed. I would have preferred a stacked button layout, but that being said, it's not terrible. It is certainly playable, and I understand that they are trying to go with a very similar look to their previous handhelds. Taking a look around the device, if we take a peek on the bottom, we do have our two speakers for stereo audio. Then we have two different micro SD card slots. The one on the left is going to be for the operating system. The one on the right is for additional storage. We have a reset button, and we also have a function button. On the right-hand side, we simply just have our power button. On the top of the device, we have our L and R buttons, but we also have an exhaust vent right over here for our fan. This has got an active cooling system, which is actually pretty good for the chipset that they've got in there. so that's nice to see. We have HDMI out on the top as well, which is nice and handy if you like to capture your video footage. We've got a 3.5mm audio jack, and then we have two USB Type-C ports. One is going to be for fast charging, one of them is for data. Then on the other side of the device, we do have our volume rocker. Now I do gotta say, this volume rocker is a little bit disappointing when you look at the grand scope of the device. Everything on the device feels very premium. The buttons feel great. The form factor feels good. It is nice and sturdy, nice and hefty in terms of its weight, but then you get to these buttons and they're just kind of loose. They don't feel very good, and I had wished they had maybe invested a little bit more money into this design right over here. Next, taking a peek at the back, we have our intake for the fan. The location of this intake isn't necessarily ideal because when you are holding on to the device, your fingers are going to kind of cover that. Not that it's going to impede the airflow, but you are going to be feeling that suction on your fingers, and it is fairly light, but at the same time, it isn't necessary. They absolutely could have just centered that and rerouted the fans. We also have our two grips right over here, which is nice. I actually didn't think that I was going to like these very much when I first started using the Anbernic products, but I really do like them quite a bit. It adds a little bit more stability in your hands when you're holding onto it, gives you that extra grip, and you don't really have to worry about it slipping or sliding. I've definitely come to appreciate these. Now, talking about the product itself, I did mention it does have a dual boot system. So out of the box, if you were to turn it on with absolutely no SD cards, you're going to be running in an Android system. Additionally, they do provide a micro SD card that has the Linux build on it, and it's more or less a Bacotera build, so you're going to be very familiar with that if you use Raspberry Pis or anything like that. It's a very simple and nice clean UI. It does look good. Now for this video, my focus is going to be on the Android operating system, simply because in my testing I did find that the Android operating system emulators did perform a little bit better on this hardware. It's what comes right out of the box, so I figured I'd focus on that, and I might come back and visit the Linux build in another video. Now before we jump into the on-screen menus and the gameplay, I do want to go over the specs. So in terms of this device, it has a 5.36 IPS touchscreen display with a resolution of 1920 by 1152. It has the RK3399 hexa-core CPU, which is clocked in at 1.8 GHz. It's got the Mali T860 MP4 GPU and 4 gigs of onboard memory. It has a 6400 mAh battery for a good number of hours of gameplay. Obviously, that will vary depending on what it is you are actually trying to run, and it is built in with the Android 7.1 operating system. Now let's go ahead and turn this device on so I can show you guys the menu. All right, so we've got it on. We can go ahead and swipe up. It is a full touch screen, so do keep that in mind. I would recommend putting on that glass screen protector if you do get one of those inside of your package, just because you are going to get fingerprints galore on this thing. So having a screen protector there just kind of adds to the safety that you're not going to scratch up the actual display screen here. So as you guys can see, we are running on the Android system, and it is fully customizable. You can adjust how you want this to look. You can add widgets and things like that if you really want to, and launchers and things like that. So it's fully customizable in that sense. And that being said, it does actually come preloaded with a bunch of emulators and applications as well. And one of the nice things is it does include the Play Store. So if there is an application or a game or something that you want to play that isn't available, you can absolutely jump right into the Play Store and you can go ahead and search and download whatever it is you want to do. Because we are working with an Android system, if we swipe down from the top, we do have access to our typical settings, including our Wi-Fi. Now, I do want to mention Wi-Fi on this device is a little less than ideal. It only currently has the bands for 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi signals, which does actually impede a little bit in terms of your speed. You cannot take advantage of any of the 5.0 networks unless you plug in an external Wi-Fi adapter that can grab those 5G signals. Now, that may not be a big deal if you are doing some on-console or retro gaming. If you are going to do any sort of streaming types of games, you are definitely going to see some performance delays there. Now, we're just going to go ahead and jump into some gameplay, and I'm going to focus mostly on the more advanced style of emulation. So we're going to look at some N64, we're going to do some Dreamcast, we're going to look at some PSP, and then we're going to wrap it up with some GameCube games. However, I do want to give full disclosure, this device isn't really ready for full GameCube emulation, but we'll talk about that when we get there. So let's go ahead and jump into some N64 emulation, and I'll show you guys how well it performs. So as you guys saw, N64 emulation is actually quite good. It performs really well, and the RK3399 chip does a good job with performance on this device. So next we're going to jump into some Dreamcast emulation, and we're going to go ahead and check that out.
Hey, over here!
Hey, can't you stop closer? Go to the department
Let's
store.
go!
Hey, Gab!
Taxi! Let's go!
Now, we ran all of our Dreamcast games through Redream. For the most part, it was playable. We did have some frame rate drops. It wasn't the most amazing experience, but it was definitely playable. And there wasn't a game on here that I played that I felt wouldn't be able to be played right through to the end. So that being said, we're gonna shift gears. We're gonna jump over to check out some PSP emulation on the PPSSPP emulator. Now, PSP emulation does run on this device, and it'll obviously vary by the game that you select, but more advanced games like God of War, Chains of Olympus are simply not going to run at full speed unless you really cap out and do some frame skip work and really customize and tweak the settings. I found that the only way that I was able to get a solid 30 frames per second was to actually turn off the buffering, which is then going to lead you to get artifacting, and you're actually going to end up with a lot of graphical errors in that. So it's not the most ideal way to play. That being said, you can absolutely enjoy a whole handful of PSP games. And then finally, we are going to jump into the Dolphin emulator for GameCube. However, full disclosure, I would not recommend anybody buy this at the current time for any sort of GameCube emulation. At most, you're going to be getting half-speed emulation, and there really isn't any GameCube games that I would consider playable at this point in time. So I'll show you what I mean. Now, this device is great for emulation up to a certain point, but because this device is running Android, you have the advantage of downloading Android games right from the App Store and being able to play those. So I will show you guys that in terms of the performance for those types of games, it does a great job, and there really isn't any issues.
missile on standby. We've taken the lead.
Now, because this is technically a Wi-Fi enabled device, you can absolutely stream games right to your device. That being said, I will show you guys a little bit of the performance issues that I had playing Xbox Game Pass streaming right to this device. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a number of games that are fully playable. In fact, you could really enjoy the experience depending on the title. That being said, any sort of competitive game, you're really going to run into issues, or you're going to want to try to find a different way to boost up your internet signal so that way you've got a better connection.
You've just grabbed it. Humans, they will run into every door they encounter.
Powers don't matter.
In 100 meters, turn left.
Absolutely beautiful screen, and for what it is, it does do a great job with performance. The things that I'm not a big fan of right now is the fact that they didn't include a dual band Wi-Fi chip. That just seems really weird that they didn't just include that out of the gate. Additionally, I don't think the emulation is 100% ready for that next generation. So for people who are looking for GameCube emulation or really high-end PSP emulation, you're probably not there yet, and it may not be the right time to buy this device. That being said, as always with these devices, there is a very dedicated community of individuals and coders that put together custom firmwares and optimize emulators specifically for the hardware within them, and there very well may be a time in the near future where we're going to see substantially improved GameCube emulation, PSP emulation, and the like. So if you are somebody who's really interested in a nice big retro emulation device, this is going to be a good one for you. However, if you had your heart set on high-end GameCube or PSP emulation, I'm going to tell you probably want to hold off for the time being. Now, this device is a premium device, and it is in a premium price point at over $200. So that being said, you'll need to decide for yourself if what this thing can do currently is worth that investment, and if it is, I will leave all the pertinent links in the description down below. But that is pretty much all I've got for you guys in this video. Again, let me know your thoughts on this device in the comments section down below. But other than that, thank you so very much for watching, and I will talk to you guys again real soon.